This is the Bars to Chains podcast, but before we get into today's episode, I want to give a special shout out to Anchor, what makes us be able to do what we do on this podcast, and I'm going to go briefly over why. The creation tools on this app is super easy to use. Once you download the app, it's even on your website. However you would like to edit and record your podcast, you'd be able to use the creation tools to edit, take anything out, add anything. If you want to add sound effects, music, anything like that, it gives it at a touch of a button. You also have no minimum listenership, so if you feel that you have $1 million idea and you want to get your podcast a bunch of views, you can make money off of it just by having a little sponsor segment like this one you're hearing now. And the distribution tools on it as well. Once you post your podcast onto Anchor, it'll distribute it to your other platforms, and without having to do it individually, it'll do it at the touch of a button, and it'll give you the links to those as well. It's easy access as well, guys. This is super, literally easy to use. I am not a tech savvy guy by any means, and I literally do it all in the touch of a button, and it just does it all for me. It does the work for me. Now, most importantly, you want to hear this. It's the favorite F word ever. This is all easy to use, and it's free. All you literally have to do if you want to have any sort of income back from it is just have a sponsor segment, and even if you choose not to, you can still use it, and it'll work for you. Now, if you plan to start a podcast, make sure you use this. It's something you don't want to miss, and make sure you give them a shout out, as they will always reach back out to you too. They have an awesome following on their social media pages, so make sure you tag them when you post your episodes. Thank you guys so much. We love you all, and enjoy today's episode. Welcome back to the Bars to Chains podcast, where I have my buddy Isaac Sandoval, aka Hiatus, in the studio today.
What's up?
So kind of crazy story. We actually go kind of a little ways back. I've known you since probably my had to be freshman year.
Yeah, you were a freshman.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I was a little shit back then that would be trying to rap battle everybody back then.
Yeah, that's how I describe it.
So I'll just kind of let you, kind of before we break open into some topics today, to kind of go over some music that you got going on, because the writer's block is over for Hiatus, and you are getting ready to put out a project.
Yeah, and it's about time. It's been over 3 years since my last release of a project, and by the time this album comes out, it'll be over 4 years. But for just the longest time, I had been burnt out. You know, I didn't take the time to network and build any connections or develop my craft before I started putting music out. And so over the span of my first 5 years of making music, I put out over 200 songs on 15 full-length projects. Yeah. You know, so I was burnt out. That's a career's worth of music, and it sucks because the music sucked, but the expression was real. Yeah. So I was exhausted. I was burnt out creatively, mentally, emotionally, and I came to this point where I couldn't write up to the level that I needed to. Yeah. Anymore. You know, it wasn't for a lack of trying. I was trying to write for all 3 of those years, and over that span, I think I released 4 songs across those 3 years, and that was the only things that I felt were good enough to put out. And so, oddly enough, it's actually my little cousin that got me back into it. He's started to write, and through showing him the ropes, I've gotten reinvigorated, and the comeback was actually sparked by the Music Entrepreneur Club, which is Dame Ritter from Funk Volume. Yeah. And DJ Payne 1, they were putting on together, it was their 2nd annual Collab for the Crown contest. Okay. And I had been off Facebook for a while, so I didn't even know that this was going on until a week before the deadline to submit. And so I thought this would be great practice for my cousin, a way for him to sharpen his skills and kind of get a feel for the landscape and what's going on around him. And so I sent him the link to the page with the beats, asked him which one he liked. He picked one. I told him, okay, what do you see when you hear it? Yeah. And he told me A Journey. I said, okay, cool. Wrote the hook, sent it back to him. He's like, okay. So I told him get to write, and I said, you're gonna do a 16 on here, following that concept that you gave me and that the hook that I wrote.
Yeah.
And so I got to work. I wrote my first verse on there. And then in the span of a week, I made him rewrite his verse over and over. You know, he's only 16. He don't know what he's doing yet.
Right.
That first verse was awful. And he, you know, at the time he felt like I was being really hard on him and everything, but I had him go back and check that verse out again, and he sees what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
He rewrote his verse over 30 times.
Well, I remember like at that age, like writing my own music at that time was very like, I didn't take constructive criticism well.
Mm-hmm.
Because you feel like you know it all.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you talk to people that have been in music for years, and and sometimes that's even the worst situation to be in, is when you don't have that.
Oh, yeah.
And you're putting out not necessarily shit music. Like I wouldn't say your cousin's putting out shit music. You know what I mean? But like you don't realize the flaws in your music.
Yeah.
You know, and that's where you start losing maybe your could have been fan base. Yes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I definitely did some horrible damage to myself that way.
Right. Right.
But in the span of a week, we wrote the song, recorded the song, and shot the music video. We got the song submitted to the contest with an hour to spare before the deadline.
Yeah.
We met the vote requirement to be submitted before the judges,
okay.
Which was that same day too. So we actually made the cut all in 24 hours. We didn't end up placing. I don't know how close we got. I do know it was a really tough competition.
Yeah.
I went through, listened to all the submissions that got put before the judges.
Yeah.
And the artist I thought they were gonna pick is the one who won.
Okay.
And when they announced the winners, it was on Insta Live, and they actually said that Crooked Eye picked the 1 and 2, the first and second place winners, and then he couldn't decide on the third place, and he sent 13 entries back to Payne 1 and Dame and said it's one of these.
Yeah.
So I'd like to think we were in that group of 13, but there's no knowing. But it was a tough competition for sure.
Yeah.
And just through the creative process of making that song, it's this uplifting song about the ride. No matter what comes from this, if I'm famous and a multi-millionaire tomorrow off of it, or if I crash and burn and no one remembers my name, I was here for the ride. And so it really lit a fire in me again. And I the day before it came out is when I wrote my second verse. We were about to leave to finish shooting the video. Yeah. And I wrote the second verse, and I said, right here and now is where the conquest begins again. Yeah. And I meant that. Yeah. And since then I've already released more music the second half of this year than I did the last 3 years. Yeah. We're in album mode, working on an album with my longtime producer and friend, Sean J. Shouts to Sean. Incredible producer. He's done beats for me sporadically over the last 8 years, and the timing was just never right for us to do a full project together, but it's finally happening.
So I mean, as far as that artistry because I kind of understand that now, it's probably been about, I would say, on the way up here we were talking about that, it's probably been about a good 7 years since I've really put together, so to speak, a project that I would put out for recording. At that time I didn't really have the funds to be able to put together music, but in terms of hitting a studio and being able to record a full project together, but I still understood the fact that I really wanted to kind of like put something out at some point. Yeah. So, but at that time, like I have what we were talking about on the way up here, a Kanye mentality where like I prefer the quality over quantity. And so as an artist, where do you differentiate that? Like what, are you really quick to hit a studio and just kind of put it out, or are you kind of wanting to see it through and make sure that it's polished and not, so to speak, kind of shortchanging your audience? Because when you start teasing stuff, people are starting to get hungry, and then you're just like, fuck, it's not done yet. You know what I mean? Yeah. So
well, lucky for me, I've always been a fast worker. Yeah. When it comes to like, I've been hit up for features same day, and like, I'll pull up to the studio on just a few hours notice, not hearing the beat, and I'll go in there, write my verse and record it right there.
Yeah.
And it's up to quality. Like, I don't, for my standard, I'm not a rewriter. I don't rewrite. If it's bad, I just trash the whole thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, I work quick. So, and I think it's really because I love that roots feeling of hip hop, that street corner vibe, just the MC and the beat.
Yeah.
So like, I'm not into doing, you know, rewrites and ad libs and everything. It's me and my words.
Okay.
And so, I mean, obviously, of course, in the past, you know, I wasn't developed as an artist yet or anything, so that led to some poor quality music being released. Luckily, through this writer's block, I've been able to figure out a lot more who I am as an artist.
Yeah.
What my vision is, what I'm trying to put out there, and I've also grown as an artist. I was working a lot on songwriting because I came to this realization that just because you rap good doesn't mean people want to listen. And so I had to learn how to make good songs.
Well, and that's kind of the thing that I've hit with a lot of artists, and I've struck kind of a nerve with some artists because they ask like, why don't you promote my shit? And I'm like, well, because you're a talented artist by all regards, but your shit's repetitive. You know what I mean? Like, I don't like when artists go and basically record the same damn song but with a different beat 10 times in the span of a year.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I'm just like, then at that point, like, I critique artists when they put out albums and they're just like, well, why did you give me that low of a score? And I'm like, well, because I felt like I heard the same song 10 times. Yeah. And they're like, well, it was still good. And I'm like, yeah, the first time I heard it was good, but then I heard it 9 more times, and I mean, I'm not gonna praise that. You know what I mean? Like, I can't. You know what I mean? Like, that's why, like, for artists like you, like, I have you in a high regard, and when I review stuff like that, for when I hear your stuff, I'm like, it's pretty good. You know what I mean? Like, you're putting out quality music. I can tell you're taking your time, like with your Barbarian track that you just put out. Like, I was like, that's pretty damn good quality. And I mean, and when I talked to you about it, I literally put it in the regards of something that I would have heard from It's Dark and Hell is Hot by DMX. You know what I mean? Like, I got that vibe off of it of like, this is quality, you know, this is good. And there's other artists out there that I just can't say the same about. You know what I mean? Like, and people get offended by it because they're like, well, I'm grinding and I'm putting in the work, and I'm like, yeah, that's true, but like, what are you doing to differentiate yourself from the pack? You know what I mean? Like, I mean, the artists that I pulled in here, and it's not to like suck my own ass, like, by any means, because I'm humbled by all means regarding that. But with people that I brought in here, like, they've all had a special skill set to them that they attribute to their music. Like, you know, shout out my buddy Major Leak that I just had in here. But this dude, like, speaks 2 different languages and does all that shit in his music. Like, he will flip it at the drop of a dime. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, his International Vibes album was very, very integral to the thought process of, you can tell the guy didn't just want to put out something, the same song over and over again. Like, it actually had not necessarily skits, but you can get to know the guy in it. You know what I mean? And that's just projects that I appreciate. You know, when people actually take their time with it and actually try to piece together a quality project, especially when it comes to projects. Singles are one thing because you can just one-off it, and if it was shit, then no harm, no foul. But when you put together a bad project and it's because you didn't take the time with it, that's kind of your foul. You know what I mean? Yeah,
and that's probably honestly the biggest piece of advice I could give, especially to artists around here. Yeah. Because I hear a lot of guys with way more talent than I have. Yeah. And I can't tell them apart because they're all doing the same thing. Yep. And they're doing the same thing as themselves. They're doing the same thing as the next guy. Yep. Is that you got to understand already that no idea is original. Okay, none of us are that smart that we're going to come up with something that nobody's ever thought of before. None of us are going to write down something that nobody's ever said before. But how are you going to say it? You bringing your personality to it, your way of thinking is different. Right. You know, like, and the example I like to use that I used for when I was teaching my little cousin was my second verse on Ride. You know, I say, the journey's long, but I travel light.
Yeah.
My feet are tired, I ain't never given up, although the gravel might.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just saying I won't give up.
Yeah.
But
in a different way.
Yeah. Nobody else says it like that. That's me. That's my brain.
Yeah.
Thinking in terms of that. You know, there's a million ways you can say the same thing, but it's that personality, it's that piece of you that nobody else has that's going to separate you from the next guy.
Yeah.
You know, so people will gravitate towards things like that. I started paying a lot of attention when I was studying into how people would phrase things, you know.
Yeah.
And so that was huge for me, is that personal voice. You're not going to come up with something new and outrageous, so give us you.
Well, and see, and that's kind of the thing that, like, that's why I'm actually kind of, just to give a little sneak peek at our what we got going on. Today we're actually recording our very first track together. For me, it is actually the very first thing that I've, from wax to booth, is going to actually come out on my end. Now it's kind of almost like the prodigal son. We should have done this a long time ago.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So this one is gonna be long overdue. But I'm glad that my very first experience in terms of getting back in music is gonna be with you, because you're one of those cognitive thinkers that, like, and it's no disrespect to anybody that has to use those to kind of free think, but you're one of the very few people that I know that don't have to be, like, that can be sobered up and put together music. You know what I mean? Like, and that's really kind of respectable in the regard of, like, you come in with that mentality of being able to do what you do best, while having that, not needing anything to kind of alter your mind. You know what I mean? So, I mean, in kind of getting into that regard, like, how do you view artists that use maybe alcohol or drugs to kind of fuel their creative thinking? Does it take away from the artist? Does it make you kind of pigeonholed, so to speak?
I don't like to ever speak disparagingly on somebody's creative process, because we all do things differently. Yeah. And for me, at the end of the day, it's about the end result. It's the end product. Mm-hmm. You know, someday we're all going to be dead and gone. We're going to be worm food. Right. But this music is still going to be here. Yeah. You know, even if I never get famous, it's on Spotify. 90 years from now, some kid could stumble across it and listen to it, and he's not going to know anything about my creative process. Right. Only the end product. And so, as long as when you sit down to make the music, as long as you're giving a piece of yourself to the world, then I don't judge anybody that needs that. You know, some people, especially, you know, a lot of musicians are introverts. They have a very hard time opening up, and, you know, like you said, you know, that's how I do it, is I create sober. I don't know the experience of being intoxicated, but
okay, so I didn't know that about you. You don't drink.
No, I do. But I'm speaking creatively.
Oh, got it. Okay, so okay. I was like, oh shit. So I'm like,
yeah, no, it's a connecting thought. So when I recorded,
got you.
This one's actually only on YouTube. It's a freestyle over a couple of Drake beats.
Yeah, I think I heard the one that you did.
It's over Pound Cake and When to Say When. Yep. When I recorded that one, especially the When to Say When, the things that I was getting off of my chest were things about me that are embarrassing and deeply personal. There's shame and regret. Yeah. And I had never spoken publicly about it in any form before. Yeah. And when I got out of the booth, and that was recorded in one take. I didn't redo any of it. So it's a 32. It took me, it's a 24. It took me a minute to do. I came out of the booth after that minute, physically, emotionally, and mentally just exhausted. Yeah. And so, you know, I don't know the type of effect that substances have on that type of emotion. You know, maybe like I was useless after that. I couldn't.
Right.
There was no way I was going to make any more music that day.
Right.
You know, and so you know, whatever people have to do, you know, to maybe some people can't put themselves out there in that fashion, and open themselves up like that without you know, something influencing how they think and feel.
Yeah.
You know, and I can't judge that. We all go through different experiences. We all have different burdens, and you know, the thing that will break you might not necessarily break the next person.
Right.
And
right.
so, you know, if that's what you have to do to be able to get through it, to bring beautiful art into the world, then
by all means, do what you got to do.
Absolutely.
So real quick, guys, for our Facebook streamers, we are going to kind of cut this episode short. It is just a little sneak peek. You do definitely want to check out the rest of this episode on our Spotify, YouTube platforms, so feel free to subscribe. When this episode releases to you guys, we will get it out to you immediately. But farewell till then. Everyone that's listening on this one, you will hear the rest of it here soon. So now that we're kind of on this part of it, I want to kind of tie that into some artists that were battling that, because we saw one of our favorite artists kind of battle with that for a long time, which some people kind of argued that when he was abusing those things, he was actually better at that time, which is Eminem. Now we're gonna kind of dissect one of his latest released album,
and I have a different theory about that. That's we'll get into.
Well, so okay. Now, before we kind of crack open that, I'd like to hear that theory, because I think we're kind of on the same thinking process here. So, what is your mentality towards him?
So the drugs, I think, definitely played a big part in that. But when he came back sober, Dr. Dre, who's one of the greatest executive producers of our lifetime, was in a much smaller role as far as the musical control. Eminem had reached this level as an artist where Drake could step back and say,
"You do you."
It's I'm here, but it's yours. You know. Yeah. And also,
so do you?
So I'm not going to say ghostwriter, because definitely not a ghostwriter. But every artist at that level, expected to continue to produce at that level, has a team. Okay. They have writers. They have people who help create.
Well, I mean, and I think in Eminem's regard, and even to those, because people don't like to acknowledge that, but some people tie Immortal Technique to Nas a lot. Like, and sometimes even arguable to, not necessarily did Immortal Technique write more for Nas than Nas wrote for Nas, but there are some arguments that some of Nas's best work might have had a little bit of exterior influence from the he's kind of like, I would say he's like almost he's like the boogeyman of New York, because he wrote for a lot of premier artists at that time. You know what I mean?
And I don't believe that. And the main reason is because, like I said, when I was studying to become a better songwriter, I was focusing a lot on the way that people phrase things, the way that they write and express. Yeah. The things that you can't fake, like a writer's voice. Yeah. And Immortal Technique and Nas, the way they phrase and express is very different. Now, of course, you can write in different styles and everything, but your voice is always going to come through, especially the larger sample size we have. Yeah. And so, excuse me, if Immortal Technique was writing that much for Nas would sound a lot more.
Yeah, don't misconstrue my words. For the listeners anyway, I'm not saying that, Immortal Technique is the product of Nas. You know what I mean? Like, our vice versa, that, he was created to do that. But like, it just, there's some, even the best of best artists can sometimes have a team that kind of guides you in the right direction. I mean, even for most of Jay-Z's career, some would argue that Kanye had a lot to do with that more so than, Jay did.
It's well documented. I seen it was a Just Blaze interview was talking about the difference between Eminem and Jay-Z and how hands-on they are. Jay is just a rapper. Right. Jay picks a beat, Jay rhymes to the beat, Jay leaves. Right. Eminem is in there.
Have you ever heard when he recorded Dirt Off Your Shoulder? You ever seen that studio session?
Yeah.
With him and Tim?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That was the biggest understanding of what you're talking about is Jay just really wants to get in and get out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I think the only like collective album I've ever heard that he actually genuinely was full hands-on, he wants this the way that he wants it, was probably the first Blueprint. Mm-hmm. And after that, it was very much so I just want to do my thing and kind of do my thing. Yeah. You know what I mean? That's it.
Yeah.
Because even with the sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. The Blueprint 3 was that way with as far as like it's in words that like he talked to Kanye at that time and was like, I want you to control all collective everything about this album. Like, it's all under your control. I could give not necessarily two shits about it, but like, I'm gonna spit verses for it. However you think it needs to come out, you have total collective control. Yeah. You know what I mean?
And see, so to circle back to my point there with
Eminem, sorry, we got kind of in a rabbit hole.
Eminem is much more hands-on, and with Dre taking that step back, you know, you're removing one of the greatest minds that music has seen for the last 30 years from that process. And then also through his overdose, the death of Proof, he lost his connection with D12. You know, he talks about it on Kamikaze in the song Stepping
Stones.
That, after they lost Proof, you know, the gap just grew. And you know, I'm not trying to give D12 ghostwriting credit or this huge
like they created Eminem
role. Yeah, they didn't create Eminem. Eminem is Eminem. But when you have that many minds of that quality working together, the product is going to be
so this is a little better. Off topic from Eminem, but it is. I mean, it's the same conversation, same group, but to kind of your reference towards D12, did you hear Obi Trice's The Fifth album this year or last year? 2019. And in specific, in the intro track, he literally references exactly what M was talking about on Stepping Stones, where he was like, I think it's fucked up that like people think that Obi's raw when he's working with M, but they think that Obi's trash when it's without him. Mm-hmm. And like that was the most like I understand what you're talking about thing ever, because I'm like, these guys genuinely felt like people only give a fuck about us because of one person. You know what I mean? And that's kind of, and it sucks because D12 overall is actually a pretty damn good group. Oh, yeah. Like, I mean, very underrated for hip hop supergroups ranking wise.
Yeah, Proof's Searching for Jerry Garcia is a great album.
Have you ever heard of that? Did you know that? I didn't know. It's kind of off topic. I like doing little tidbits on here. Did you know that Proof was actually in The Longest Yard?
I feel like I knew that, but I don't remember.
No, I was watching it last night, and that's why, because I was like,
I know he's an 8 Mile.
So he was one of the when they go play. I think when when Paul Krug goes to go play he goes to go play basketball, right? And like pretty much everyone's over there chilling. He's one of the inmates over there just hanging out.
Okay. I'm gonna have to go back and look.
Yeah, it's like a super fucking cool Easter egg, because I was like, oh, that's dope. That's Proof. You know what I mean? Like, and I just kind of thought it was funny. But yeah, I mean, Proof overall like was he just was something else. Yeah. You know what I mean? Very underrated in the hip hop community.
Yeah. And that's something that I think had more of an effect than the drugs.
Yeah.
Is losing all those creative minds, because then too, if you look at Eminem post drug abuse, the general overall dip in quality.
Okay, and so my question is, do you view post Eminem drug abuse as relapse, or do you view that as recovery? Because some would argue that it still kind of felt like he was in that halfway getting out of drugs mentality and relapse, but it still kind of felt like he was a little more substanced up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I would start it at recovery.
Okay. Just so that we were kind of tying the timeline together here.
And then too, if you look at non-Eminem albums that Eminem has executive produced from that time period, also a dip in quality.
Yeah.
You know, so, and again, the separation from Dr. Dre. So,
do you think that was the reason why because I know that this was a big deal back in, I want to say it was 2016, around that era. Why Slaughterhouse had such a shit show performance as opposed to D12, because D12 actually had a couple albums that were highly regarded.
Yeah.
They weren't like,
albums.
you know, classics, so to speak, for the average hip hop head, but it was very kind of
and
still recognized. You know what I mean?
And D12 is cut from that exact same cloth as Eminem. You know, once that was, they come from the same time period in the same city.
Yeah.
You know, they met, they joined up together, and from that time on, they came up in the business together.
Yeah.
You know, Slaughterhouse is a super group. These are 4 solo artists that came together to form a group, and then now they're teaming up with this guy who is not, let's be honest, Eminem's not the most in touch, you know. He's a megastar. He can't leave the house.
Yeah, see, that's kind of something that I felt why projects like Kamikaze and Revival, and I'll cut it at there because me and you are going to kind of dissect the next one after that, the follow-up act, is because he was so out of touch with everything. I mean, I find this funny because, like, I mean, the diss track was one of a pretty damn good diss track. I mean, for me anyway, but it was so out of context because of some shit that happened years ago, and it's like, now you want to bring it up, you know what I mean? Like, and I think, like, I hate both our sides of it, because we talked about this actually with one of 2 girls that came in, and their take on it was very kind of similar to mine. Like, they thought, and this is from the average girl, they thought it was petty, and I thought it was too. You know what I mean? Because like, you're bitching over something that MGK said about your daughter 4 years ago. I mean, now I'm not okaying what he said, but you would think that it'd be kind of a little far-fetched that you're so out of sync with, like, you weren't even using Twitter, you probably don't even control your social media platforms at that time, that you're getting upset about something that microscopic. You know what I mean?
Well, and see, I wanted to in my head, when I was listening to that episode, in my head I'm screaming, no, that's not how it went, because I'm such this hip hop nerd,
right?
And
you
so
saw
I want to jump in
like
the conversation.
And so I was, that episode was a little kind of crazy, because I mean, I'm not gonna lie, we were a little bit buzzed. But yeah, I mean, people actually think that beef started from that, and actually it was MGK sneak dissing M on some Tech 9 shit.
Well,
and
the Eminem diss on the Tech 9 record came because Eminem did know about the tweet right away, and he allegedly blackballed MGK. MGK is not allowed at Shade 45, and that MGK's diss on Tech 9's record is about the frustration of M calling Diddy and doing all these things to get in the way of MGK's career.
But see, like, some of that I kind of don't believe, in the regard of, like, MGK wasn't a big deal all the way up until he did that song with Kalani, and even then, like, the hip-hop community was like, you're kind of a cornball, dude. Like, you had this, like, I want to be Eminem mentality up until somebody allows you to do a mainstream track, and then when you do it, that pretty much becomes your career. You know what I mean? Like, even today, people are kind of clowning the dude because they're just like, dude, you're so far away from your roots that, like, it's almost kind of laughable. You know what I mean? Like, you're becoming something you set out to not be. You know, kind of like a Star Wars reference. You know, you were supposed to bring balance to the Force, not join them. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I don't know, dude. Like, and it's kind of funny because I was never really the biggest MGK fan to begin with. Like, he just kind of rubbed off almost like the Great Value version of Eminem to me.
Yeah, I've never been an MGK fan.
Sure. I mean, and I think the only track I even knew him from was because he had that track with DMX when DMX was trying to make his comeback. And I even thought, like, I don't even know who this guy is, you know what I mean? And then now I'm hearing DMX and I'm like, dude, DMX sounds rough. Like, that's pretty bad, you know? And so, you know, to kind of reel back in, like, it just, like, him not having touch and having, like you were talking about, his creative personnel. I mean, don't quote me if this is the wrong name, but is it Rick Rubin that's handling Eminem's pretty much everything after Relapse.
Well, Rick Rubin did Marshall Mathers LP 2.
Okay.
And I believe Revival. Oh, sorry, I keep hitting the table.
No, you're all good.
And Revival.
Okay.
And I feel like those are his 2 worst albums this side of the substance abuse.
Yeah.
And
so what did you? Okay, because we've had this conversation, I think, before. What did you think of Recovery?
I really like Recovery.
Okay.
I definitely I can understand why the hardcore Eminem fans hate it, because it's such a departure. But I think that's something that I like about it, because what was done with Slim Shady, Marshall Mathers, the Eminem Show, we got a snapshot, and Relapse too. We got a snapshot of where Eminem is in his life, in his personal journey, what he's going through.
Yeah.
And we got that on Recovery. It was just so different because now he's out on the other end of this journey.
I just trip out on, like, when I hear people talk about Eminem albums, there's a lot of people that have, like, songs selected and it's in their playlist because it's good Eminem music. There's only, like, a couple in Recovery that people actually saved, but there were actually a lot of hidden gems in that album. Like, 25 to Life was one of my favorite Eminem tracks of all time.
Yes.
Like, I mean, he literally almost kind of exposed the music industry. You know what I mean? Like, he kind of made it understandable why these artists have these, like, breakdowns in their career, because they almost feel like they're serving a prison sentence while they're supposed to be in the peak of condition of their careers. You know what I mean?
Well, and that's always huge for me. Like I was telling you before we got started, the only song I liked off of Revival was Walk on Water, because for me as a creative, when and these tend to be songs that the majority of people don't take a second look at because it's not relatable for them.
So I have a question for you. Do you think the choppy flow is forced onto Eminem by whoever's helping him in his creative team? Do you think that's their idea more than it is his?
No, I think it's his.
Really?
Yeah, I think he, with the exception of maybe Royce da 5'9", I think Eminem is surrounded by yes men.
Okay.
Right now that are just like, well, you're Eminem, so we're not going to tell
do
you
whatever you want.
Yeah. And I mean, and I can't blame him for that.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's Eminem.
But see, I think that's why I think his music has taken a little bit of a setback up until Music's Been Murdered By, is because Dre, I mean, I know you were kind of talking about Dre, like he was very much so kind of letting him do his thing. Now, Dre also was the same kind of person that was like, I don't think you should do that. You know what I mean? Like, do what you want, but this is what I would do differently. You know what I mean? And I think right now, nobody's telling that to Eminem. Right? I guarantee you. He's literally getting beats. He's putting the shit together himself, and that's it.
You're Eminem, and aside from Royce, which who knows how much time Royce is spending in there with him on the Eminem solo projects, and Dr. Dre, who else is around on that level to be able to tell him, like, you know, I don't think, you know, we can work on this one and make it better. You know, I don't think we should do that. You know, there's nobody else of the same type of ilk that can go in there and voice their opinion.
Because he's at the pace that he's at right now, he's releasing about an album and a half every year. That's about what we're getting from him. He already released his album this year. There's rumors that he has something else already cooked up.
Oh boy.
Do you think that the time is coming where M needs to retire?
Yes.
And do you think that needs to be after, because he's probably going to keep dropping, do you think it should be after this album that's coming out and he should just kind of almost kind of take the Jay-Z route and just start mentoring the next generation and just start kind of taking that understanding that your prime is well past you, and you need to just kind of do you know? I mean, there's a lot of your life that you probably want back, you know, and maybe it's time, you know.
Well, of course, you know, rappers, we never really retire.
Right.
So I mean, you know, he's still gonna make
5 times.
You know, I mean, he'll still, like, I have no problem with Eminem doing singles, doing guest appearances. You know, even the closest thing we have to retired is Andre 3000, and he pops up with a verse every now and then. So I don't see anything wrong with that.
He retired after he released his last Outkast album, and he's popped up at least on, to my knowledge, at least 10 tracks since then. I mean, did you hear his verse with T.I. on that Trouble Man the Mind or something like that?
Yes.
I like that one. It was one of my favorite bars.
I really loved him on the Tribe album.
Yeah,
that was great.
Yeah. But yeah, back to our kind of original topic.
But I feel like, again, with the out of touch and then the dip in the quality of music, I feel like Eminem's not living enough life in between these projects to give us compelling content.
Okay.
You know, not being, and then especially, you know, now we're in, or maybe now that we're in quarantine and we can't leave the house either, maybe that'll help us relate better.
Well, and I think that's why he was saying that he has so much music cooked up because, I mean, back then this dude's been on COVID quarantine for the last 20 years.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I mean, so much so that, I mean, the dude has very little interviews over the course of his career because he just doesn't do that. You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't really go out much.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the whole premise between MGK's diss track in general. Like, you're so pigeonholed to, like, you're in your own little bubble that you don't even, not necessarily don't know the world, but, like, you're so well out of terms of how hip-hop is today.
Yeah. Well, I mean, contrast that to, you know, what a lot of people would consider his magnum opus, you know, the first Marshall Mathers. Yeah. He's in the world. He's being attacked over Columbine. You know, he's being attacked by politicians about, you know, we need to censor this and everything. And he's talking about all of that. He's in touch with what's going on around him. He's in touch with the world. And now,
so the counter argument is, do you think that now is the time for him to start, if he wants to make one last push to solidify goatness, you know what I mean, is to be making music now because he's back on being in tune with the world in terms of he finally understands social media and he's talking about things that are actually kind of happening today, you know what I mean? Like and I think that's the reason why the kill shot basically, like the track itself, some of the verses in there, I was like, okay, he actually knows what the fuck he's talking about. He's not actually just talking shit to this dude without any sort of substance. Like, he's actually talking about G-Eazy and his relationship with the girl that they have in common at that time, and, you know, basically kind of like almost kind of a resurgence on him understanding that there's more to just bar for somebody, you know what I mean? Like, you can actually kind of open up your arsenal by understanding what you're talking about. You know, I don't know. See, I won't really lie. I am kind of a stan, so to speak. Now, it used to be when I was younger that I didn't see Eminem could do any wrong, and I just appreciated every project as a classic. And now that I've grown up, I've understood the difference between a classic and a piece of crap, you know what I mean? And I'm actually kind of, the last 5 years for him has been shoddy for me because I'm like, there were just projects that I could have done without, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, at the time, the Marshall Mathers LP2 was cool to me because I was in high school and it dropped and I was like, oh shit, this is the first thing he's done since Recovery. And I'm like, all right, well, I may as well just kind of appreciate it for what it is. And now I'm kind of thinking back to it and I'm like, that was such a, you know what I mean? Like, I could have, I didn't understand what the mentality was towards it, especially when you make it a sequel to arguably the greatest project you ever put out.
Yeah, that was my biggest issue with it, was it was kind of just a collection of
like the
songs.
The great value version of that original masterpiece.
Yes. So it seemed like I was saying, if it was a mixtape, I would have liked it better. Yeah, because it seemed like just a collection of songs. There wasn't that kind of cohesion. There wasn't, like I was saying before, that snapshot of where he is in his life.
So that's the thing with me with all of that, is I think this kind of goes full circle back to who's managing it. Like, he is very, like, there's a big difference between Rick Rubin handling most of his projects as opposed to Dre, which Dre is just, he's a mastermind when he comes to, I mean, look what he's done with Kendrick Lamar. You know what I mean? Like, people that try to say that at that time, like, oh, well, Dre's only what he is because M popped and no one heard it before. And it was like, Kendrick came out and that narrative just disappeared. Like, everyone was like, okay.
And I mean,
you know what I mean? Like,
and I don't ever want to try to sound like I'm throwing dirt on Rick Rubin's name either. You know, the man is a legend for what he's accomplished. But again, you know, just it's a different. The way the sound has evolved.
Where I'm going with it is like the duo between Rick Rubin and Eminem is not one that I would put in a high regard.
Yeah,
like it doesn't come out good. To me, it doesn't.
Yeah.
I mean, it just seems like the two are on two different pages.
Oh yeah,
like and that's why I get frustrated because like. The bars that M is spitting is actually really good.
Oh yeah,
like it's still in tune with what he was doing back then.
Some of the highest level stuff we've ever seen.
But the beat selection is just mediocre to say the least. And I'm like, fuck, dude. Like I mean, that's where it's kind of like you wasted albums at that time. To now you're actually putting out quality music, and it's kind of being thrown under the bus because. Now you're just coming off as the 50-year-old white boy that's trying to just out-rap everybody. Yeah. You know?
And then with that, too, with Dr. Dre, that comes the importance of the executive producer, the overall vision for the project as a whole. And, you know me, I'm one of the toughest critics that you'll ever come across. You know, in the entire history of hip-hop, I'll tell you there's not more than 30 classic albums. Right. And then let's just stroll through Dre's resume real quick. Straight Outta Compton. Okay. The Chronic. Yep. Doggy Style. Okay. Chronic 2001. Okay. Marshall Mathers LP. Get Rich or Die Trying. Yep. The Documentary. Okay. Good Kid, Mad City. To Pimp a Butterfly. Okay. That's 9. Out of what I would say there's 30 total. Yeah. That's almost a third.
So I have a question for you because we covered this on our last podcast episode. And actually, I don't know if it was the last one or the one before that. No, it was on Trick or Tariq. We talked about Compton. Thoughts?
Not a classic.
Okay. Was it noteworthy?
Absolutely. Okay. I give it a 4.5 out of 5. Okay. And I think where it struggles to become a classic is the very compilation album feel to it. It's tough to get that many different artists on the same page and execute a vision like that.
So I compared it to a project that was very kind of close in timeline. The difference between the projects are 3 years. So not in hip hop, that's a second. You know what I mean? Now I compared it to the Black Panther album. The difference is one shot to basically the movie had to abide by the soundtrack. Yeah. Compton abided by the movie. And that was where I think it became not a classic. Yeah. You know, like, because I mean, I think if it was actually Dre putting an album together, we're talking about something that's in his top 2 for catalog. Oh, yeah. You know what I mean? I think not that it would have been better than the first Chronic, but I think for the features that he had, and if he would have done more, I'm gonna be Dre, I'm putting out an album, like Detox kind of mentality towards it, then it would have been maybe better.
For sure. And that's the trouble. Look at that. You know, we just ran through his resume of classics, but look at Compton is his worst album in his solo discography.
Yeah, that's right. That's pretty good.
Most people don't put out an album that good ever.
Okay, so I have a question for you. What would you rather see as the best send-off for... Because Aftermath's pretty much at its last leg. 50's been somewhat retired for I don't even know how long. He tried the whole G-Unit re-up, and that was crashing and burning. Yeah. So M's kind of at that piece getting close. I think these next 2 albums by M will one of them be his last, I think. Dre's been arguably retired. I mean, pretty much. You know what I mean? Like, other than that whole when Straight Outta Compton was going to come out, it seemed like he kind of reconciled with some of his old, well, I mean, they had already squashed the beat like decades prior, but he kind of got in touch with them as far as Ice Cube and all those guys that he used to be a part of. Would you want to see Detox be a collaborative album between him and M, and that would be their final kind of ride off in the sunset?
I don't think so.
No?
I think what I would want to see from Detox is something much more along the lines of the Chronics.
Really?
Yeah, and not necessarily the sound, obviously, because the sound has evolved. But I mean,
Yeah,
that
there's a
type
big difference.
of.
Yeah.
I don't want to see a Dre M
Shock
collab
rap.
album like that. I want to
Okay.
see Dr. Dre do that collaborative West Coast thing. You know,
Okay.
the West Coast is big on collaborations. You know, the games albums are stacked with features the same way that Dre did with the Chronics.
Yeah.
And so the way I would like to see Detox is I'm gonna need an unreleased Tupac verse on there.
Okay.
I need an unreleased Easy verse on there. I want to hear Ice Cube and Ren back.
Okay.
You know, I need to hear the Dog Pound. Let's go dig through the crates.
Really
Let's
make
find
it
a
make
Nate
it a
Dogg
true
hook.
Chronic album.
Yeah. You know, and just all of Dre's.
So, I mean, my question is, according to Dre, he has a lot of music done for Detox.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I don't think it could be released as an album now.
Yeah.
But there were songs that were singles back then that were connected to Detox really hugely. Like, I Need a Doctor, Kush. I think he had a track with... I always forget that one because out of all those three, it was the least favorited version or least favorited single that he put out over that, like, 10-year where we thought Detox could drop at any moment. And do you want him to kind of scrap it or put those songs in there?
I definitely think it would need to be an entirely new.
Okay, so
thing.
you like everything needs to be now.
Not necessarily now, as in like trying to chase the sound, but and Dre is too much of a perfectionist, and I think he's dug himself in too deep a hole with what he's got. I think he would have to start clean for us to ever see Detox.
So I have a really good question for you because as a hip hop head, you understand the difference between what I'm talking about. Being that Dre doesn't write his own music, who do you want to write it? Do you want Kendrick or do you want M? Because Kendrick is more in tune with the times. He's got a hotter hand than most right now. I mean, he hasn't released anything since Damn, and people are pretty much crowning him the album of the year and haven't even heard shit from him. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Honestly, I think I would want to hear Royce the 5'9" write it.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
If you don't know, Royce wrote The Message on the Chronic 2001.
So I actually had heard something crazy too. Did you know that Jay-Z wrote Still Dre?
Yes.
I did not know that up
Jay
until
wrote
like
Still
last
Dre
year.
and The Watcher.
Yeah.
Which is why there's The Watcher 2 on Blueprint, because that's when everybody was coming out with the Jay-Z biting allegations. And it's where you get that skit. I'm not a biter, I'm a writer for myself and others, because they were trying to say Jay-Z bit off of Dre on a song that he wrote, trying to claim he bit himself.
Right.
You know, and that just comes from people who don't know hip hop.
Yep.
Just real quick on that, if you think Jay-Z's biting, you need to listen to more hip hop,
Right.
Because that's called interpolation, and everybody does it.
Question. So, do you think Drake bites?
Well,
Because I've had I don't like talk to this person anymore, but I had some kind of ass on my podcast earlier in the season 1. Do you his basically thought process was Drake is coordinated as the GOAT because he could take people's flow and basically their song overall and turning it into something that people view as a classic. Do you think that counts? And is it biting?
So I think it gets slippery when you got Drake, because of course, you know, he was found guilty of plagiarism in court for the Rappin' Forte verse, but I don't think that was biting, because biting is plagiarism in hip hop. I don't think he was trying to pass that off as his own.
Okay.
He knows that was Forte's verse, and there's no way he thinks he's getting away with stealing a whole verse and nobody's going to notice. So I don't believe he was trying to pass it off as his own. I think it's a horribly misguided attempt at paying homage.
Okay.
As far as from other like lesser known acts, you know, he was accused of taking the Migos flow. He was accused of stealing from XXX.
Yep.
Again, like with Eminem being out of touch, Drake is very much in touch.
Yeah.
And I think some of them are cases of subconscious recollection, like Pharrell jacking the bass line from Marvin Gaye. Where Pharrell's familiar. Pharrell knows Marvin Gaye's music, and he wasn't trying to steal the bass line. He's the way he said it in court was, we're fooling around with the bass. And I played something. We're like, oh, I like that. I didn't even realize that it was from this Marvin record. It's in his mind, subconsciously, and he plays it.
I fully believe in today's day and age, there is no stealing music anymore.
Yeah.
Because samples of the day and age, I mean, that's just it. Samples are something in hip hop that will be embedded forever. Like, there will never be anything that isn't sampled from something. Yeah. And even if, that almost becomes like where the new wave kind of shot themselves in the foot, where they try to create something new and it sounded like shit because you just, like, a lot of people kind of take mumble rap and they're like, oh, these are just these morons that don't know how to rap. And actually they're just trying so hard not to bite that they created a piece of shit. You know what I mean? Like, and I genuinely believe that's what happened because, people hate this dude. Lil Yachty is actually a cognitive thinker in terms of writing music and rapping.
Yeah, he's a great writer.
He could spit you a full 16 and actually be fucking solid. But he kind of almost dumbs it down because he knows his audience. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And again, back to the interpolation thing, like, Drake and Jay-Z get accused because they've done it with artists either that we know and love and everybody's familiar with, or artists that end up, in Drake's case, blowing up right afterwards. But this is something that everybody does. This is something that I do. Yeah. On my feature with Atlas on the song Conquer from his first album. Yeah. Nobody knows that I interpolated because I interpolated XV. Yeah. People are not familiar with XV. XV on his Zero Heroes mixtape said, y'all were only about dreaming when it's convenient. Yeah. And I start my verse off saying, I say, how should I go about this? I was always about this. I found out that a passion's offensive and that the rest of them were only about dreaming when it's convenient. Yeah. XV is one of my favorites. And I pulled that specifically to pay homage to XV.
I'm not gonna bullshit. Like, when I was writing, I think I tried too much to be original. Like, and I think that's the reason why I was having troubles between getting paper to booth, is because I'm trying to do something that's never been done before, and I'm trying not to make it so sophisticated, but yet trying to make sure that I'm keeping up with what would be quality music. You know what I mean? And that was where it was like, sometimes you have to be okay with not necessarily biting, but use inspiration the way that it's supposed to be. You know what I mean? Like, we don't make music for it not to be inspiring to the next wave. And if you are doing it to not inspire the next wave, usually you're not really regarded high in hip-hop. You know what I mean?
And to tie it back into what we were talking about, Eminem, if you've never seen it, you need to see The Art of Rap, Something from Nothing documentary that Ice-T put together. And in that one, they're talking to Eminem about his inspirations. And the way Eminem put it was flawless. He said hip-hop didn't create anything. Right. Hip-hop recreated everything. Right. And so that's when I tell people who accuse Jay-Z of biting, that you need to listen to more hip-hop.
So I have a question for you. Do you like trolls?
Trolls?
Like hip-hop wise?
No.
No? Not at all?
No, not really. Okay.
So, because you're one of the more upper echelon people in terms of grading artists. You know what I mean? You have a high bar. You read and basically dissect music from the base element. You know what I mean? Like, you kind of like the mad scientist in it, I would say. What are your thoughts on Cardi B? And I mean, speaking from an actual artist standpoint.
From an artist standpoint? Yeah. I mean, she's not an MC. Okay. But we know that. She doesn't write. But at the same time, there is artistry in that delivery, in that presence. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of women who can out-rap Cardi B. Now, but can they get in that booth and make you believe it?
Do you think she would be? Because from, the the Mount Rushmore for female MCs is very different based on who you ask. Mm-hmm. Do you think she's passed some of those people on Mount Rushmore?
Not for me, no, because
Okay.
I always approach it from that, because like we were saying earlier, I love hip hop and what it is at its core and its roots, where it came from, and hip hop is anti-establishment.
Okay.
So we do not measure success or quality the way that the establishment does,
Okay.
which is accolades and sales and all of these things. At the end of the day, it's you and your pen.
Yeah.
For me. Now I can have those debates of, but you got to let me know we're taking into account sales and that type of stuff, and I'll adjust how I look at it.
Okay,
but for me,
no,
absolutely not. She's not on that.
For those of you, I am the biggest. Hold on. I might use this word wrong. I am the biggest fucking. How would you even say it? Like, I am the biggest obsessed person with hip hop ever. Like, we were talking on the way up here how many albums I reviewed. I'm at 150, like, for 2019. So I obsess over this shit. I understand exactly what you're talking about. And when I used to have my grading system back in 2018, a bit of it was flawed because I had, it was a 60-point, basically grading system, which now it's 50 because I've taken out this subcategory, which was charting and reviews. Which a lot of albums actually had gotten decreased because they were like, so out of 10 they were given a 3.5 because they didn't crack Billboard and they didn't crack a high review system. And it kind of I almost kind of feel like reviewing 2018 because I'm like, there were a lot of stuff in there that was up there, and it should have been up there, and it should have been in my top 64 for when I'm grading half the year and the other half of the year. Yeah. And there's some albums that probably would have made the bracket in terms of if they didn't have that extra category to it. So I get what you're saying about Cardi in terms of the sales can be misconstrued. Yeah. Have you? Sorry, I keep.
Well, and I just wanted to add that like we were saying earlier, that the end product is what I'm concerned with. My favorite rapper put it very well, I think, on his show Everyday Struggle that was on YouTube for a while. Joe Budden said, my ears don't hear what he sells. Okay. And so, I want you to sell. I want you to make great money from doing what you love. But at the end of the day, it's hip hop, and we evaluate the product.
So I'm about to probably make the most asinine statement, maybe. But it's because we went to a party last night. Well, not a party, but like a get together with my other podcast that I have.
Yeah, social distance.
Yeah, hey, you know what? All right, listen, we weren't sharing the bottles. No, I'm just looking around. No, but yeah, we had like a little kind of celebratory get together for our podcast that we just launched, Two Queens, One King. And the co-host and I were kind of just talking at a round table, and we were like, we were listening to Meg Thee Stallion's album. Oddly enough, that is not my go-to preference, but girls had the aux cord that night. So oddly enough, the first thing that popped in my head when I heard some of the delivery and some of the writing techniques that she had on her album kind of was tied together to Missy. I got that. Absolutely. I got that Missy vibe from her. And she...
You can see it even in her style.
Yep.
Her, the way she dresses and.
Well, and Missy was one of those I'm not gonna pull punches type artists.
Absolutely.
And that's exactly what Meg is. Enough so much so that I don't think she'll surpass Cardi in sales and shit like that, because Cardi just has the game hooked under her finger.
Yeah, and it's the part of it too.
She puts out a 15-second song and it's gonna go diamond. Yeah. And I mean, like, there's nothing you can do about it. I mean, an ad lib from Cardi B is probably worth $1 million at this point. Yeah. So I kind of feel bad because I think Meg's she's more talented.
Absolutely.
And is a better bar spitter than most right now, and
well, and maybe not. And this is something that a debate that I have with people, because like I was saying earlier, these a lot of artists around here that are struggling, that have way more talent than I do, It was actually.
Do you like to name names or no?
Oh, I can't keep them straight, man.
Okay, no, you're good. Because I sometimes I want to catch who you're talking about.
Yeah,
but,
just the general landscape.
Yeah, no, you're good. You're good.
But it was a skit. I want to say it was the intro to Royce da 5'9's Bar Exam 4.
Yeah.
There's a skit on there, and it says one of the biggest misconceptions is the difference between skill and talent.
Okay.
It's a talent you have naturally. Skill is only developed over hours upon hours and hours of working on your craft.
So I have a go ahead.
And if I'm being honest, my musical talent very minimal.
Yeah.
Very minimal. I knew nothing about music. I had no idea of how to do this. I was just good with words.
He said the closest thing I had to an instrument was when we all had to play recorders in 5th grade.
Exactly. That's to this day, that's the only instrument I can play.
Really?
And now it's only hot cross buns. So
it's funny. I see, and I think that's the reason why I couldn't do producing, because I'm not really an instrument type person. I am very kind of more electronic. Yeah. I like when you use almost like synthesizing to your voice. I look more into that than I do, and that's even just vocals. You know what I mean? I look more into that than I do the instrument element to it. That's why, like I said, I always shout him out on my podcast. But shout out to my cousin Ghost Kid, because he very is in tune with how to use instruments in every regard. I mean, the dude's kind of a mastermind to it, and that's why I think kind of why I couldn't do it. You know, because I see other people that are actually really knee deep into it, and I just couldn't see myself trying to learn
but for me, that's something like when people tell me you're talented, I feel like that's almost insulting.
Yeah.
Because it's not. This happened because there were so many nights I didn't sleep where I just stayed up studying and writing, and for hours upon hours. Like I said, those first 5 years, I put out over 200 songs.
Yeah.
Probably triple the number of that never came out.
Right.
You know, the amount of work that went into this, it feels a little insulting to say, like, oh, you're talented. And so
I got to a point in my life as well where I would fill notebooks out.
Oh, yeah.
Literally, I mean, like, somewhere in when I moved from the place I live now, prior to that, there was at least 5 notebooks that were full of material.
Oh, yeah, no, I've got a whole dresser drawer full of them.
Yep.
That's what we were shooting the music video for September, and my camera guy rolls up, and he's like, and I go hop in the car and everything. I put my notebook away, and he's like, "Were you just writing?" And I was like, "Yeah." He was like, "Already?" He's like, I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Have you ever filled out a notebook?" I was like,
"How many?"
Yeah, I was like probably about 15.
Yeah.
I was like, that I still have.
Right.
I don't know. I've lost a few of them.
Yeah, I've lost a handful of them. I actually don't have any of them right now. I think the only thing I have right now is the yellow notepad that I filled out when I went to my first ever national wrestling tournament out in Florida, which I actually wrote on the plane. And I think it was because I literally was, literally at my whole wrestling team was sleeping, and I'm like just sitting there by myself, and I'm just like kind of had like a spark to just want to write.
Oh, yeah.
And actually it's kind of funny, the inspiration was that song Headlights by Eminem on that Marshall Mathers LP2, where he's kind of reconciling on some of the shit that he had gone through since he started making music.
Yeah.
And it kind of inspired me to think the same way. I kind of felt like I was like, you've been doing this for a long time and never really even have anything for anyone to listen to, but like the journey has come almost full circle for you because you grew up. You know what I mean? Like you were making music out of rage, and now you have to do it actually thinking. You know what I mean? Like, what is your mind process behind really trying to get across what you're trying to do? And I think that's kind of, like I said, I mean, it's the weirdest thing with me because like I said, I don't have any projects out. I don't have anything really for you to listen to other than a couple of videoed freestyles on my Facebook, and even then I don't even know where that's all at.
Right. And
I'm really kind of like anxious to see like what's changed since then. Do you know what I mean? Because like you almost grow up. You know what I mean? And you almost kind of like have to go about it a different way.
Absolutely. I can't stand artists that don't grow. Their music doesn't grow with them.
I have a question for you. Are you still familiar with Young Tone?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How do you feel he is? Because I sat down and talked with him about like a couple months ago, and he's hopefully, if we can kind of get it done, he's going to come in here and have kind of an interview too. Dope. But he is one of those artists that I've kind of had in that mentality too, where I'm like, man, the ceiling for you is so high. Mm-hmm. You just got to channel it. You know what I mean? Like you have all that talent built up, and like, and it's
that's a talented dude right there.
Right. I mean, we used to get. I mean, back then when we were the old Adam City days, he was running laps around most people at our little. I guess we could just call them Adam City Cypher sessions now. Yeah. But that was one guy alongside with you that I'm like, these guys could be doing some shit in the next couple of years. Yeah. And it's tough because I see the talent in, you know, all you guys, that it's like just that extra push. You know what I mean? Like, and it makes the difference. Yeah. You know?
I definitely think that he needs to put out content more frequently.
Okay.
For sure. But the quality is there.
Yeah.
The quality is there for sure. I wish I knew what, I can't remember the name of the one that he keeps putting on his story. Yeah. And I want to put a 16 on that.
Yeah. Well, and so one of these days we'll need to do like a reunion Adam City thing, because they're still even out of that one school, that one class where a lot of artists were pretty talented that were coming through, and it I felt like there was some, how would you say, like there was some heat seekers that could have came out of that. And I still somewhere in my archives have that track that me, you, I want to say it was Sean Frericks, and somebody else had actually written up. It was like The Hardest Ball Is Only, I think.
Yeah, yep. I do remember that. I remember that.
I have the lyrics for that somewhere.
Oh man.
I mean, I want to do that. Would be sick to do some sort of cipher for it. That'd be dope. I mean.
We got to bring Atlas.
I know. That's always like, we got to really kind of making some phone calls. Yeah. But yeah, man. And like, see, a lot of people have asked me like, what do you want to see come out of it? Because back then they could tell I was making music because I was just genuinely wanting to put something out. And it wasn't necessarily like a get rich quick scheme. And they're just like, well, you haven't really made a name for yourself. Like, people probably don't even remember you even made music. Yeah. So what is your mentality going towards a project? And I kind of, I don't really know. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes that's okay, because sometimes with music, most good projects come out of, I don't even know. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, you almost kind of like, it just came to you. You know what I mean? Like, kind of like that cliched moment in Straight Outta Compton where Dre's in a writer's block / like production block where he doesn't really know what to do, and he gets exposed to smoking weed, and that becomes his inspiration for the Chronic. Right. You know what I mean? Like, that type of shit. You know what I mean? Not necessarily in that same exact thing, but like kind of feeling like I'm just kind of waiting for it to spark. Like that. What is the final product? You know?
I think a big thing for you will be figuring out who you are as an artist, finding your voice, because it's, you know, like you said, that leap from the paper to the booth hasn't been made, and that's a big adjustment.
Well, and like we were talking on the way up here, and this is a kind of another PSA for our local artists, is don't always get in touch with the production company that want to see your vision, like a producer that genuinely wants to see your vision. Any producer can tell you, I'll charge you this for this amount of time, come spit whatever you have written down. But it takes a special producer to be like, let me help you. You know what I mean? And not help you from this sounds like shit, I wouldn't play it in my car, let me try to put something together that I would play in my car. But like, let me help you as an artist to make something that you genuinely feel quality about. You know what I mean? Like, you felt like you got your full experience. You know, and that's tough to come by, you know?
Yeah. And if we're going to be giving out advice to artists, I'd like to give the biggest thing that's made a difference for me, and if you don't believe me, I can prove it. When we put out this song, I can re-release some of my old stuff so they can see how far I've come.
Actually, I am going to kind of make sure this makes it into the final cut. You'll be able to see or hear the instrumental for this
Nice.
for our project or our track that we're putting together tonight in the intro, so you guys can kind of see what's coming.
But
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm hesitant too because it's so bad, but I might re-release some of my old stuff so they can see how far I've come.
Yeah.
It's the biggest gold nugget I can give to the up and coming artists is you have to be able to take critique.
Okay. Yep.
Now
Perfect,
I know
perfect.
people critique you, and you want to lash out. You cannot do that.
Yeah.
All right, that will just when
You'll destroy yourself.
when you're making music, your entire life is a job interview. People talk and people remember things, and word will get around about how tough you are to work with, and it should hurt. If it doesn't hurt, you don't care enough about what you're doing.
Right.
Critique should hurt, but you cannot lash out. You need to hold that in, and if you hold on to it, give yourself some time to cool down, and then go back with fresh ears and pay attention, you'll probably see what they were talking about.
Well, and I mean, that's the thing is, like, for the first time I'm hitting the studio, I'm not expecting for me to come out with the Chronic 3.
Yeah.
I mean, like, you always have to understand that there's room for improvement. I mean, now I feel like I've taken all this time to really bottle something good together, but I am going with the mentality that I'm gonna learn. You know what I mean? Like, it's gonna be a learning process as long as you make it one. You know what I mean? Like, the second that you think you have it all figured out, even as a pro artist, as like even the person that we were just talking about earlier, you start to lose content because you feel like you've already made it and you don't have to increase off of what you've already done.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And I learned this lesson for myself from a good friend and mentor, BK. Shout out to BK. She's an MC from Los Angeles, brilliant MC and insanely talented. And I wanted to get a verse from her on a record that I was putting together. And when I sent it to her, she just straight up and brutally honestly told me I can't put my vocals on this. She said it's not up to par for what I know you're capable of, and I'm not putting my voice on this to get put out to the world. And that stung. It stung, and I was hurt. I was mad at her even, and I shelved the record, and it still has never come out. But a few weeks later, I went back and listened to it, and I'm like, you know what?
She's
right. Absolutely right.
Yeah.
She's 100% right.
Well, and that was the thing is, so I won't say that this is the first time I have hit a studio, because I have. Somewhere deep in the archives, I have some shit that was recorded back in like 2016, and that's actually where I hung up the mic, because I knew at that point in time, well, I thought I knew, music wasn't for me, because I was like, I know what I want to do. I haven't figured out how to put it together yet. And that is the one thing I will say in all my life I regret quitting in. Because, I mean, I know this kind of hurts to hear from some people, but losing the passion for some of the sports that I used to have passions for was the greatest thing I could have had. Because I've seen it happen a lot where you put all your cards into one deck and you make a certain sport your whole livelihood, and then it doesn't pay off for you, and then you forget why you even ventured into it that deep to go to college for it, and you don't walk out with what you set out to do. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, and I think this everyone kind of knows what I'm talking about. There was a lot of issues with people, even from my own family, that they were upset that I didn't continue wrestling into college, and I think it was the greatest thing I could have done, because I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today. You know what I mean? I probably would have been at a lackluster degree at best, because at that time I thought everyone thinks they have their life figured out, you know? I would have been doing into a career that I don't even have interest in doing now. So don't be afraid to sometimes to take a knee on some of the shit that you think you have figured out, especially if you're coming out of high school and you were trying to figure out your life. You'll never have it figured out until you're even past the age that I'm at now. I'm still figuring shit out.
Oh, yeah.
And I kind of reel back. Music was something I do regret giving up on, because I think I, at that time, was hitting a threshold where I was almost there. And I had the drive for it at that time to really be putting quality shit out. I think I just needed a mentor. I needed someone to teach me.
Absolutely.
You know what
That's
I mean?
something we didn't have in
Right.
Commerce City.
Yep.
There was no musical legacy around. I didn't start to see.
Well, and nobody wanted to help each other out. You know
That
what
was
I mean?
it too. There was so much trial and error for me in Adverse.
Yeah.
Those first 5 years, and you could see little improvements from project to project. But when I was finally able to connect with Paul Jr. from Mint Audio down in Denver, legend in Denver, I was able to link with him on Facebook. It wasn't until that happened that I started to grow exponentially, because I've finally had, and I met a few other people too, actually, through Facebook. BK was one of them. My guy Richard Montalvo, Red X Lion, that were able to mentor me, and the growth was exponential. People who had different ears than me, people who had different music experiences than me, were able to broaden my view of not only just what music could be, what I could be. And I think that actually might be a big part of the cause for my 3-year writer's block that happened right after my last project. I listened to that project over the phone with Red X. He's from Chicago. He listened to it with me over the phone, giving me his thoughts as we went through it and everything. And at the end of it, he told me, he's like, man, he's like, I feel like there's something missing. He's like, you're almost there. He said, and he thought about it for a little bit. He told me, he said, you're an animal. He's like, you've been an animal. He's like, you've got to get off the leash. And I spent those last 3 years figuring that out. Barbarian was actually originally supposed to be me and him. But he's stepped back a little bit for personal reasons. And we were never able to make it happen, me and him. But that verse that I have on there is my same verse that I wrote 3 years ago, and sent to him. And his reaction when he got that was the payoff that he was talking about. He was going nuts. He said, that is exactly what I was trying to get across to you. He's like, you got off the leash.
So real quick, in the last 10 minutes of the episode, we're going to kind of go back to a little bit of what we were going to do earlier in the episode, which is we're going to kind of short summary this album. But Music to Be Murdered by Eminem this year was something that we have something similar in common, where it's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I would say it's almost about 20 songs?
20 songs.
Yeah, 20 songs on there, and it is a little bit of an unorthodox album. It kind of almost tries to pay homage to what his earlier work was. We were talking on the way up here as well. Before we kind of grade this album real quick, what was your overall thought process behind it? Just hearing the single, well, there wasn't really any singles to it, but hearing that there was some sort of work coming in, and this is before the album came out. You hear the M's gonna drop. There was a lot of rumors going on. There was some, people were even making Wish track lists, you know what I mean, of features that would be on there. Lil Wayne was in there. There was, they were hoping for a No Love Part 2 type deal. They were hoping for the 50 and Dre song, which still to this day is kind of, where is it? You know what I mean? Everyone's kind of I
was nervous.
Okay.
This is somebody that has been incredibly influential to me as an artist. One of my favorites, obviously one of the greatest that we've ever had, and it breaks my heart to see him, kind of ruining his legacy almost. And that, I say it that way because I can't really think of another way to say it, because of course his legacy is solidified. There's nothing more that he has to do, but
no one will ever replicate what he did.
Yeah, he's coming dangerously close to having more bad albums than good albums. And that's something I don't want to see for an artist that I adore.
So overall, do you think it was a good album?
I do think it was a good album, and I
is
think
it top 5 in his categories?
Let me see.
So, okay, so I'll just read you the list of albums. We may not be able to grade this album fully all the way through, so we'll kind of give our short summary on it. I'll go through his career. Obviously, I'm going to assume you're not going to put it over anything Slim Shady LP to Eminem show, right?
Yeah, no, those are there.
Better or worse than Encore?
Better.
Better or worse than Relapse?
That's where it gets a little tricky.
Yeah.
Because I love Relapse. I don't even think Eminem's a fair critic of his own work on that.
I hate that he hates that album.
Yeah.
It bugs me so much because I'm like, dude.
It's very similar.
Do you know about Relapse 2?
A return to form.
Do you know about that?
Relapse 2.
Yep. There's a Relapse 2 done, and it's not released.
Oh.
And it was actually supposed to be. It was supposed to be Relapse, Relapse 2, and Recovery was never supposed to happen.
Okay.
That's why, like, you ever heard that song On Fire in Recovery? That was originally on Relapse too.
Oh, okay.
That's why it kind of doesn't match the tone for the rest of the album.
And
it kind of sticks out like a sore thumb when you listen to it again.
Yeah, no. Oh, man, it's right there with Relapse.
Okay, so I would say like a draw.
Yeah, that's close.
Recovery. Better or worse?
Man, see, it's tough there again
Right.
because they're very similar in quality, but they're so different in tone.
Yeah.
You know? I think I would give the edge to Recovery there.
Okay. The Marshall Mathers LP2.
It's better than that one.
Revival.
Better than Revival.
Kamikaze.
Better than Kamikaze.
Okay,
Kamikaze's not as bad as those other ones.
It would be sitting in your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It'd be sitting at number 6.
Number 6. That sounds about right.
It's fair. Do you think that if he can't keep putting albums together that crack his top 5, which the bar right now for you anyway would be Recovery, Recovery or Relapse, depending on what order you decide to organize it in, do you think he needs to stop making music if it doesn't exceed those expectations?
No, I think he can hover right around there.
Okay.
And I'd be more than happy to listen to it.
Okay, I guess my follow-up question is, do you think that if Music to Be Murdered by the albums that are to follow up, because there's rumors that he's actually putting out again, do you think that if the albums are better than Music to Be Murdered by, do you think you should keep making music?
Absolutely.
If it's worse, then retire, right?
Yeah.
Okay. See, I'm kind of in that same spectrum. Real quick, because we do only have like 5 minutes left. What was your favorite track from Music to Be Murdered by?
Yaw Yaw.
Really?
Absolutely.
That was my least favorite.
Oh, it's that classic hip hop, man. You got that Busta Rhymes.
That's why I didn't like it. Yeah, I think I love the craftsmanship.
I'm a sucker for Q-Tip on the hook too.
Right, and I think even Black Thought was on there too. Yeah, I liked his verse as well. Or no,
I would have liked them to see Busta. I would have liked to see Busta on that.
I think I liked Royce's a little more. Royce was pretty cold on it too.
Yeah.
But see, I think if he would have chose a different sample from something.
Oh, I don't know, man.
Like, I think if he would have done something a little more 36 Chambers Woo, I think it would have been colder.
Let me tell you, I was sitting down listening to this. Right, I started listening to it on my way home from work.
Yeah.
I get home, and by this time I'm in. You know, we had Godzilla.
Yeah, you're knee deep
Darkness,
into the album. Yeah.
Leaving Heaven. I'm like, okay, we're here now.
Okay.
So I go and I sit down.
This is when you're first hearing the album, right? Okay, so I heard it the morning going to work. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah,
See,
I was like,
I was nervous, so I waited.
Yeah.
And I get home, I sit down in the chair with my headphones on. I'm listening to Leaving Heaven, sitting back, and like, okay, yeah, this is good. Leaving Heaven ends, and I hear yaw 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 yaw, and I sit up. I said, okay, we're here now. I said, this will let me know the direction that we're going here. If this is something that, if I'm gonna finish this album or if I'm gonna be upset later.
So I'm gonna ask you a question because you know who I am. We've actually had a pretty good, strong friendship over the last like handfuls of years. Yeah. What do you think is my favorite track on the album?
Your favorite track on here? Let me scroll through the track list again. Because to be honest, I honestly haven't.
Because I mean, you know my taste in music.
Yeah.
You know what I mean. So I just kind of curious to see how well you actually.
And I haven't revisited. Well, that's the trouble is I haven't revisited this album much.
Okay. So you haven't really heard it since it came out.
No, not too much. Because I had a job where I couldn't listen to music.
Yeah,
so I'm way behind this year.
I got you.
I'm way behind this year. Let's see.
could take a guess.
I might have to guess Darkness.
Yeah, you got it, man. Good shit. Yeah, Darkness is my favorite track.
I would like Darkness better if I wasn't on the opposing political view, but it's masterfully crafted.
Yeah, I didn't like the political aim. I love the storytelling.
Yeah, the storytelling was beautiful. The way he put it together.
I thought it was crazy when I first heard it. It literally like at that time I was driving to Aurora to work, so I was on I-76, and when I figured out what he was doing, I was like, fuck.
Yeah.
Like,
you have that moment of
wow.
Yeah.
I was just like, okay, all right, I'm in. Son of a bitch, I'm in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it was nuts, man. Well, fuck, dude, we got to get you back in again. That was a pretty damn good episode. I genuinely thought that we had some good context here, and we definitely need to revisit this album because we'll probably jam it out sometime later and really kind of figure out what it is. You know what I mean? Like where it's leading, and maybe by the time we have you on again, maybe we'll have seen a new Eminem album drop because I've heard some rumors. So, but anyway, thank you so much, Isaac, for coming in, man. This is anyone that listened to this episode, very in depth. We basically dissected everything for you. Even dating back to some earlier stuff into now today's hip hop. We appreciate you guys, love you guys. To all my Bars to Chains fans out there, go check out 2 Queens 1 King. We just launched our new podcast, and my buddy Hiatus here. Go check out his music. You want to hear quality music, go check it out. He's gonna give you basically no pulled punches music if you're into that, and for most of my hip hop heads, I would imagine you are. So enjoy. I will be sure to leave a link in the caption below for his music and the links to our other stuff. Enjoy, guys. We hope this message reaches you in good health. Thank you guys so much. We love you all, and peace.